Hello friends, this is Ginger. Today I'd like to talk to you about the fiat currency system that we currently live with. So in the last about 3 years I've been studying contract law and all sorts of things that I never had thought about before. And I learned a little secret about banking, which is we are the value behind our money and our currency. So I'm going to take some time to talk about it. So the Federal Reserve is not a federal organization and it doesn't have a reserve. It's a private group of bankers who print money, and they even charge our government interest, which is really interesting because if you think about the fact that people who create the money charge interest, it doesn't make any sense. Where is the ability to pay back that interest? It's like if I had an apple and you didn't have any apples, and I said, that's fine, I'd be happy to share with you. I'll give you this apple, tomorrow you give me 2. Where would you get the 2? So there's always someone who loses in that kind of a system. So when you apply for a loan, you fill out what they call a promissory note. And it basically says you're going to pay them back. And your signature, your sign of nature, is the thing that's most valuable. You can put any amount on there, and that piece of paper to the right people is worth that amount of money. So what the banks do is go to the Federal Reserve discount window. They take these promissory notes and they turn them in for fiat currency. So if you apply for a credit card and you think, oh, these banks are just so friendly, just giving out of the goodness of their heart, that's not true because your application has been monetized prior to you getting the credit. So when you spend that money, you're just spending money that you have created through the bank. So that's an interesting thing to learn about. We went off the gold standard in the 30s, and then silver was taken away. I think that was in Nixon's time, I'm not quite sure. But basically, the gold-backed or backed currency that we had was taken away by the government, and now we have fiat currency, which means there is no value other than what we give it. And it's interesting because every Federal Reserve note, every dollar bill or $5 bill or $20 bill that you pass around is only valuable because you think it is. And I have a nice little story to tell. So a man was traveling, and I have to say, this came from Paul Michael Yates. He's a British man who I have learned a great deal from. So there's a pub, or there's a hotel, and a man comes to the hotel with a $100 bill. And he puts it on the counter and he says, I want the best room you have. And so the man who owns the hotel says, well, why don't you go find the room that you think is the best, because we all have different taste. So the man who was traveling goes upstairs and begins to look in the rooms. Meanwhile, the man who owns the hotel takes the $100 bill and he goes next door to the butcher. And he says, here you go, here's payment for my orders in the last month. We should be good to go. The butcher says, thank you so much. Your account is paid in full. When the hotel owner leaves, the butcher goes next door to the seamstress's house. And he says, here's the order I had for my wife's dress and my daughter's clothes. Here is the payment for it. And she says, thank you so much, you're paid in full. Your account is closed. And so he goes back to his butcher place. And the seamstress takes that bill to the restaurant. And she says, here is my payment for my dinner for the last month. And the man who owns the restaurant says, thank you so much, you're paid in full. And so she leaves. And the man who owns the restaurant goes next door and finds the prostitute that he has been employing and says, here's payment for your services. Thank you so much. And she says, thank you so much. Payment received. And so then the prostitute goes to the hotel, and she takes a $100 bill and she says, here's payment for my use of these rooms during the last month. And the hotel owner says, thank you so much. And then the man comes down the stairs from looking at the rooms in the hotel, and he says, none of these rooms are acceptable for me. I'm not going to stay here. And he takes his $100 bill off the table and leaves. So that's an interesting story about how fiat currency works, the value we give it, and the value it actually has. And thank you so much for listening. Hope to share more with you later. Bye.